Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where we talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Instinct. Quite a few interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, we have the whole continuation of it. Like I said, I guess that's going to be like the overarching case this season is the Sleeping Beauty case. Obviously, that's coinciding because obviously Dylan wants to be on that case with Ryan, but it's like, no, he gets signed up with Fucci, and obviously Dylan and Lizzie investigate this person who was found on a roller coaster. His name is Elliot. He's a musician. His twin sister Annie was there. Well, she comes to the scene because she had a feeling that it was her twin brother Elliot. Interesting enough, the actress who plays Annie, I'm blanking on her character's name, but she's in the NBC show New Amsterdam. So I was like, hey, I feel like there's something else. I might have thought the same thing when I was watching New Amsterdam. I feel like I recognize that actress from something else, but I can't remember what it might be. I might know her from. It might just be my imagination. New Amsterdam might be the only thing, but I feel like there was something else I recognize her from. But nevertheless, that's me going into a tangent. Actually, I really like that being a beautiful element of this episode because Dylan's the only one that appreciates it. And, because obviously he brings up the whole point that, like, there are some people he refers to Lizzie as one of those people who, like, music kind of does nothing for them. It does bupkis. That the fact of the matter is it doesn't excite that part of the brain that it normally would in any other person. The thing is, like, the music in this episode was very beautiful, like, ranging from the Annie and Elliot music. That was, I guess, the word kind of got used, like, I think they said funky, but it had a really nice vibe to it. And then, like, I'm one of those people that can really vibe with some depressing music, and Elliot's obviously, like, his solo music was kind of leaning more that direction, but it's like, it's so somber and sad, but it still sounded so beautiful. Like, I don't know, it's just kind of like one of those, like, makes you want to legitimately listen to, like, the entire song, because I don't know, they sounded so beautiful, so that's me just gushing about it. And I think that's kind of something I share with Dylan in this episode, because even Lizzie calls him a music nerd because he was like, oh, look at all of Elliot's, like, collection. He's like great music all across different, genres and time periods and stuff like that. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting thing. But it even, like, it didn't come up directly during the case, like it comes up in conversation with Andy later on. But I think for Dylan, he resonates with Elliot because music played a big part in his life, because, like, obviously him and piano and stuff like that. Like, obviously he had a complicated relationship with his dad, and then obviously, earlier enough in his life, there's a whole situation with his mom being sick. So of course that's just going to, music was, and he even talks about it, it was like music was his safe space so he could resonate with Elliot on that same regard. It's actually kind of an interesting case because it's kind of like, okay, they start noticing that Elliot, ever since he quit the band, he started doing more interesting things, because, like, one, it's like, okay, he started working on his own music, but his music just heavily changed from the music he was making with Annie. And then it's like they look across and it's like, oh, he's got a Maserati in a garage. Apparently he stole it with Randy, but Randy was like, no, he did it on his own. And then he asked me that I want it, and I was like, no, I don't want to get dragged into your criminal stuff, because he's already got 2 strikes against him. Third strike would have, really made things bad for him. But, Elliot was kind of like almost thrill seeking. He just needed to find that next thing. He wanted to feel something. And eventually, hearing from Annie about the situation with their mom is actually kind of sad. Their mom would take them to, like, a amusement park for him to get on the rides, because he, had a fear of them and everything. It's like, You Only Live Once was the title of one of his songs. And sadly, like 2 days later, their mom died in an accident. She had a seizure and ended up hitting, like, something and ended up dying. And so that actually builds upon something that Dylan helps Dylan figure out the case. In fact, it's like, oh wait, he had, like, what was it, the term he had used? Persistent deja vu. Basically, a seizure had happened, and basically it did something to the lobe of his brain that would basically he feels like every moment of his life, basically everything is kind of boring to him. The reason why he had this sudden shift in personality is because he felt like everything was already done before. Like, it was just something in his brain that made him feel like that. So he was just constantly trying to feel something, because everything, just like even the music he made, is like, to him it never sounded great or beautiful or perfect, because it just sounded like, oh, I've already done this before. So it left him kind of this unyielding emptiness, and he tried to fill that void with whatever, skydiving, stealing a car, robbing a bank. It wasn't for the things themselves, but it was just to get to feel something. Even the roller coaster he was on, just so he could feel, even if it was an emotion like fear, just to feel anything. And that just sounds like the most heartbreaking condition to be in, and it kind of coincides with kind of what ended up getting him killed, because the band's manager Ross, because basically it's like, oh, I lent you all this money, we were struggling, but the fact of the matter is we were going to make it once we signed this deal, but Elliot wouldn't sign it because of his condition. But Ross obviously didn't know that. No one really knew. It just seemed like, oh, Elliot was just not willing to sign it. It's like, don't do it for the money, don't do it for your music necessarily, just do it for me. And but Elliot wouldn't. He would just like saying go away. He fired him just because it was kind of like, oh, we're doing this again, even though but for him it just seemed routine. It was just kind of like, oh, we've already been through this before, it's boring. Of course, so he's not going to have that attachment of like, this is my friend, this is someone asking me to do this. So Ross tried to use fear to kind of intimidate him, but it didn't work, and without even realizing it, he pulled the trigger, killing him. And it's just a sad turn of events, situation they kind of found themselves in. I was just like, I don't know, it's kind of a very obviously a very somber story, just to find out things kind of played out that way. So I did like kind of lighten things up a bit, that whole thing of like, oh yeah, Lizzie, I was like, oh yeah, like the person is like, oh, you want me to go through all these bags? This was at an amusement park. You want me to look for vomit? There's tons of vomit in these bags. Well, I'm about to get off in 2 minutes, and I wasn't paid for overtime, so I just got to wait till the morning. It's like, oh, and then it's like, well, I guess we'll just have to do it, Lizzie says. And then you have Dylan being like, oh, you get on that. I'll go get the confession. It's like, you go, and you just got Lizzie stuck there going through the garbage, finding the vomit, which ultimately it seems like she did. So. But I do love that obviously this episode has that side of things, but it also has a little bit of a, fun side of things. Obviously, like Lizzie, like Jasmine staying with Lizzie and just kind of like having a drink and kind of party it up, just because it's Jasmine's way of kind of coping with it. I love that, like, Lizzie comes in, she meets Ryan and everything. She's a little irritable and everything. She's like, who are you? He's like, oh yeah. She's like, you need a haircut and shave your beard. And just like, she's so like snippy. I love it. And then it's like, yeah, but she's like, at the very least, as crappy as I feel, I know Jasmine's going to feel worse. So that's the only solace I get from this. Jasmine pops in. It's like running things are like, yeah, this is Ryan. He came in because the case we got last episode coincides with the case from where he's from. And you look at Lizzie being like, how the hell are you on top of your game like this? Then later on, Jasmine's like, hey, let's go to this club and kind of party it up. And Lizzie was just kind of reluctant, like, yeah, because obviously she wants to be trying to be a best friend. The fact of the matter is she's trying to support her friend during a trying time. It's like, oh yeah, she broke off her engagement and everything. But obviously, it's something that, Dylan was like, oh, you can't keep going at it like this, because I mean, you came in here kind of a mess just from drinking, but also going to be out partying too. That's a lot. That's just not, your scene and everything. And Lizzie ends up talking to Jasmine about it later on too, because Jasmine doesn't really want to talk. Like, it's that thing of just kind of like, you're dealing with this very thing and you just kind of want to just like kind of not really deal with it right now. That's kind of like, running away from the situation. And and it's kind of sad, because I like the way Lizzie put it, because for Jasmine, it's like, yeah, this is how you handle things back when you were younger. It's like, oh, you got your heart broken, you party up, you live it up type of thing. Sure, but now you're older. It's not just because you're older. It's like the decisions you were making weren't just like simple decisions. It was like you were literally basing your life around like, oh, I'm gonna spend the rest of my life with this person, and now that's over. You're gonna build a family with this person. Those are big, heavy life decisions. So it's not like this is just something that can kind of go away by you partying it up. It's like, no, you eventually have to deal with this, So Jasmine isn't quite ready to talk about it, but she is going to be cutting back and stuff like that. I also love that the whole conversation is like, oh yeah, but by the way, Julian, we can't, meet up at my place anymore because Jasmine's actually moved in. So Julian was like, wait, what? So that was interesting. I love when Dylan calls him near the end of the episode from Lizzie's phone, because it's like, yeah, he won't answer if it's from anyone else, especially at this hour. And when it was all said and done, Dylan was like, okay, and kind of giving him the at the end. I was like, that was so unnecessary, but I loved it. It was so cute. But I also do like that Lizzie and Jules, or rather, even Julian, whichever way we're going to really potentially be referring, might as well just call him Julian, not so get caught up in the whole Jules things. But I just love the fact is that like him and Lizzie kind of have to keep their relationship secret about, especially considering he's working with her now to a certain extent. I mean, that was the whole reason why Dylan called him, because it's like, hey, we can call him for help because he works with us and everything, so we don't have to worry about like, oh, the shady means how we get information. So that was kind of a neat obviously continuing element of that story. Also love that Ryan is struggling because working with Fuji, because Fuji's kind of like turning down the leads that Ryan wants to go. It's like, we're not going to do that. But Ryan's got his ideas of like, oh yeah, we should do this and do that. It took him talking to Dylan to be like, Dylan being like, we're having someone like him as a boss. It's like, all you have to do is go behind their back. And you have Lizzie almost being like, what are you talking about? Don't give him that advice. I also love, like, earlier on when it's like they're at the crime scene, like Lizzie's kind of feeling a little crappy, and it's like, oh, here you are, Dylan, in front of me, waving that corn dog, knowing that I'm kind of potentially going to vomit any moment. It's like, here you go, hold my corn dog while I check the body. And Lizzie's like, I'm your boss. And then she hands it to Harris, and he's like, well, I'm your boss. And I love it. He stood there with it regardless, so that was pretty neat. There was also another element to this episode, and obviously Dylan's kind of like, okay, so what we're going to do now is kind of take this investigation board. We're going to make it so that we're investigating the births. Like, basically, they're going to take a deep dive into these families of the children they're potentially going to be adopting and kind of making it into this big thing. Obviously, Dylan kind of gets caught up in working for Andy. It's like, oh, I've narrowed it down to 6. And it's like, and Dylan's just like, oh, you choose. He's like, what? After all that, you're just going, you're caught up in work, so that's all. This is all comes secondary. It's like, no, and it's like, you can tell, like, Andy felt like this last season. He felt the last episode. He's feeling it even more now. It's like, oh, I guess his family doesn't matter as much, because the fact of the matter is, once you get a new case, that's all you can really focus on. It's like, no, we'll worry about this in the morning. Andy ends up apologizing at the end of the episode, but once again, it's the whole thing for Dylan. It's like, my safe space was first music, and then it was the CIA, and then it was you, and this family we will build. Know that no matter what the circumstances are, it's always going to be the most important thing to me. So it's like, what we're going to do is they're not just going to pick one family. They're going to vet all of them kind of all at once, and, it's going to be time consuming. Like, it's going to take a lot of time, but, for this family that's so important to them, they're going to do this. So I just thought that was kind of a nice element to the whole situation. So I'm very interested to see if we actually get to see them kind of investigating and meeting a lot of those families and see what that whole process really looks like. I'd assume that'd be a big part of their storyline this season, like kind of diving into that whole thing, like seeing it firsthand as the audience. But it's going to be interesting to see where they handle that. There's also, like I said, the overarching case. Obviously, Ryan kind of put some stuff together, like it goes to like a dry cleaners or something like that, and a particular blouse kind of ends up connecting the case here in New York to the place that Ryan's from, because this case is very important to him, because the first victim was kind of a pillar of the community type of situation, and he made a promise to the family. It's like, I'm going to do whatever I can to remedy this situation, essentially. So now it's a thing of like, he made a promise that he was going to solve this case, so that's why this case is also so important to him. So, but I think we're going to see progression in that kind of going forward. So it's probably going to be for a little while a background thing, but then eventually it's going to build up into something more. I also can't forget there's a person who came after Julian, kind of blew his spot up and everything, metaphorically speaking, but also literally to a certain extent. So it's going to be like, okay, what's going on that front? Julian was saying he's going to stay the whole Jules situation once he completely clears out the NYPD's computers. It'd be kind of neat. I kind of get the feeling like he's probably going to be around a while as Jules. Maybe not. We'll see. But I kind of hope he does, just because it'd be kind of interesting to see him and Lizzie just kind of, like, obviously Lizzie's going to be like, oh, we got to keep it professional here and, like, make it seem like there's nothing there. But maybe if enough time passes, maybe it can kind of be okay, because it's like, because there might be rules against, like, inter-department, like, relationships. Even though they're kind of different, you're still, co-workers, so it'd probably be weird and probably against the rules type of situation. I don't know, that might be an element, but it's also just so that might be the real main reason why Lizzie's hiding it, but also it's just kind of, it would have been weird if, like, because they made the whole point to be like, oh, we don't know him. But the thing is, like, given enough time, I think you can be like, oh, it's okay, we got close as long as he's been here, so you can kind of justify if anyone caught you together type of thing. Maybe that's some shenanigans we might see going forward into the, with all of this. But I'm very interested to see where this all ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.